This video is not for anime onlys, and I'm just gonna say right now, spoiler warning, if you are an anime only and you don't want to be spoiled for Attack on Titan aka Shingeki no Kyojin, then I really recommend you to close out of this video right now, because there's a lot to talk about and it's gonna be really hard for me to figure out a title for this video and a thumbnail without spoiling, because I really do not want to spoil anime onlys, because this chapter, no, let's back up a second. What I have read since I stopped reading the manga has been incredible. Easily the best part of this series, and just like, whoa. But once again, though, I'm just gonna say, if you are an anime only that is up to date with the anime, or even if you're not up to date regardless, you just do not watch this video. It's a spoil, unless you don't care, and by all means continue. But, okay, with that out of the way, so I guess let's kind of clarify a few things. If you follow me on Twitter, then you most likely have known for a little bit now that I've kind of caught up. And I'm going to explain. The reason why I kind of caught up was because I rewatched Attack on Titan recently. And you know, when I did that video a few weeks back, basically talking about a certain scene that I analyzed that talks about humanity and its core, you know, that's when I kind of caught back up. Like when I, you know, rewatched it, basically. Not caught up, rewatched the anime. And when I rewatched it, I was really itching to see what was going to happen. So my curiosity led to another thing, and eventually I couldn't hold back, and I just started reading the manga. So yes, I couldn't hold back. But there was another reason, too. And once again, since I've already said spoiler warning, I can say it, since nobody should be watching this video unless you're up to date. I was also spoiled for Sasha's death, which that kind of pushed me a little bit more over the edge to just decide to read the manga, because, you know, I don't want to be spoiled anymore. If I'm being told that Sasha died, I don't want to be spoiled for anything else, because if a character like her can die, then obviously, you know, there's probably others that are going to die very soon. So I did not want to be spoiled, so that was another reason, so I just started to read. So okay, with that out of the way, and the tragic circumstance of me being spoiled, these chapters, though, the latest chapters, I have not been spoiled, and they... honestly, I don't even think you could spoil. Like, if I legit was to talk about the premise of these past few chapters to someone that was an Attack on Titan fan, I don't even think they would understand. I legitimately don't. That's just how bonkers it is. And not in a bad way, it's so... whoa, compared to the themes from the anime. Like, if you look at Season 1, Season 2, and Season 3, it is just bonkers compared to it. And you're just like, it's not even really the same series anymore. But like I said, it's not bad because it still represents what Attack on Titan has always been. So, it's just crazy. But okay, this latest chapter, though, is something that I really needed to talk about, because it blew me away, honestly. It was a big moment. Like, I wanted to talk about the last chapter, and I was really debating heavily on it, but then this chapter came out, like, 2 days ago, and I'm just like, I gotta talk about this, because my thoughts on this is just, like, exploding right now. There's just so many theories and thoughts and etc., and, you know, I'm just gonna be straight up, okay? The things I probably talk about within this, you know, video might be common knowledge for a lot of Attack on Titan fans, Shingeki no Kyojin fans, you know, that you guys have probably already talked about all this constantly since the chapters have been coming out for a long time now, since I stopped, and so some of the theories I come up with is probably old news, and so if I regurgitate things you probably heard before, please forgive me. I'm just gonna say that, but I want to get my thoughts out on how I felt about reading these chapters, but also the latest chapter as well, because it is just, it's mind-blowing to see how far the series has gone, and how Isayama, you know, the writer of Attack on Titan, how he's perfectly crafted such an amazing story. And honestly, I used to give Attack on Titan kind of like a lot of crap back in the day, like a long time ago, because I felt like the character Eren was just very meh. Honestly, I thought that, I'm not gonna lie. But after, you know, spending a lot of time with this character, you know, seeing what happened to him in Season 3, or in the manga, you know, I really started to like him as a character, how he matured and he changed. He was just so different. And basically now with what has happened in this arc since, you know, when I stopped reading, Aaron's character has just went through so much. Like, he has been aged by conflict. He's been aged by just so much horrific things he's had to see in his life. It's scary, honestly, and it's like all the characters are kind of battle-scarred to that point. Like, every single individual character, our main cast, has been battle-scarred to a point where they're not even the same person they once were when the story began. Even at the end of Season 3, they're not even the same as that, which is just, whoa. But, getting back on topic, though, the thing is that there is a lot that happened within the latest chapter that plays with Norse mythology, and I think I made it very, very clear a lot of times throughout my history reviewing anime, talking about manga, etc., reviewing manga, analyzing things. I've talked about how much I really enjoy mythology. I think it's a very fascinating subject. I'm not saying I know every single little detail of mythology, I know a few things because it's interesting, and I really do like Norse mythology. I love Greek mythology. You know, I love certain, you know, themes of mythology. There's a lot of lessons to learn and, you know, analyze and just break apart, and kind of Attack on Titan, it's not really trying to hide the fact that it is definitely heavily inspired by Norse mythology. I mean, with the whole, like, paths dimension, it's literally the world tree. It's the world tree that is depicted in, you know, Norse mythology, the main story of Norse mythology. And then when you think about what's happening now with the rumbling, it's Ragnarok. It's straight up Ragnarok. If you know about the story of Ragnarok and how the world comes to an end, and it's inevitable, and it happens, and eventually the world is born anew, and you have it where there's two survivors, basically, and it's Adam and Eve, that's kind of what's happening here. And I don't know if, you know, Isayama is willing to follow that path and completely do like a Ragnarok. That would be a very dark ending for the story, but I think that it's very apparent that Attack on Titan is heavily inspired by Norse mythology. And I have to say that there's a lot of things you can gain from what happened to Ymir and how the Titan power originated and how you can kind of apply it to, you know, Norse mythology. And when you read the chapter and she falls down into the tree, into the pit of water, there's two beings from Norse mythology that come to mind when I think about, like, a serpent, snake-like worm shape, but also kind of like a dragon shape. And the two things that come to mind is Nihog, I think that's how you pronounce it, I've never been able to pronounce that name right, and the other one is Jormungandr, the world serpent. These are two figures in Norse mythology that come to mind when I think of, like, what happened to Ymir within this, you know, chapter, the latest chapter. And honestly, Isayama might have combined both of those actual Norse mythology figures into her character, because you can kind of look at both sides of the story and apply to what happened within the chapter as her full story, and kind of want to dive into that. Nihog, which is basically the dragon that is underneath the world tree, it was constantly chewing at the roots of the world tree. And the whole purpose of it is it wanted to bring down the world tree to be able to just topple over and get rid of, like, the eagle on top, basically. He was really angry because Ratatoskar, which was a known liar, would spread information, start problems between the citizens of Norse mythology, especially those that were near the world tree. And so it would go up and down between the tree to the top to the bottom, basically causing problems and probably spreading a lot of lies and making both sides, the eagle and also Nihog, you know, very upset and wanting to do something. And so obviously Nihog, as this serpent, something that is very, like, dark and grotesque, something that kind of represents hell itself, wants to rip down the world tree, which represents the entirety of all the 9 realms of Norse mythology. And so if the tree was to come down, technically the world would end. That's kind of what Nihog is about. And it's very similar to what Ragnarok is. Ragnarok is literally set in motion the end of the world as they knew it. And that's why I say the depictions of Jormungandr or Ragnarok is the same as Nihog, how you can apply it to Ymir. Now, getting a little bit more deeper into detail, though, Nihog, which was underneath the tree, if you look at the events that happened within the, you know, the chapter of Attack on Titan, Ymir ran into the tree, she fell down into this pit, which was like an ocean, lake, we don't really know, but it was a pit. She fell down underneath this tree. And as I talked about with my Norse mythology story, it's Nihog. Nihog lives underneath the world tree, and the tree obviously isn't a world tree, but it was definitely a very distinct and old tree that we saw in Attack on Titan, which basically fits the characteristics. And that's kind of what she encountered. She encountered a creature that was Nihog that basically attached itself to her and started gnawing at her, and it connected. Now, obviously, obviously, there's other theories you can say is that it's a parasite, which most likely that really is the true reason. I'll get into. I just want to talk about the mythological message going on throughout, this chapter. And so when Nihog attaches to her and all that, that's basically what that serpent creature is. But it also could be Jormungandr, because Jormungandr was also in the sea. He was in the ocean. He was traveling around the World Sea, and eventually he got out of the World Sea, and that's when Ragnarok began, when he finally got out of the ocean. And the main message here is when he finally let go of his tail, that's when Ragnarok began. And that's kind of also what happened with in this chapter with Ymir, is when she finally got the courage to stand up and do what she wanted, to be free and make her own choice. That's kind of very similar to what Jormungandr did. Instead of constantly repeating the endless cycle, he let go of his tail, and he started Ragnarok, and then Fenrir as well started Ragnarok. And I know it's very complicated. There's a lot to Norse mythology, but there's so many things going on here with the similarities that it's just ridiculous. They're all meshed together, and I really do like how Isayama is very, very heavily inspired by these themes. And so, the easiest way to kind of summarize all of this, okay, to make it in simplistic terms, is that right at this moment, Ragnarok is beginning, thanks to, Ymir and Erin's decision, or Ymir's decision, and the World Serpent, which is basically, and the Ouroboros, which is the endless cycle. You probably have heard about the snake that bites its own tail, wraps around the world and all that. Basically, when it finally lets go, the cycle ends. And when you think about what Attack on Titan's been, it's always been about a cycle. It's been a cycle constantly going around and around again. The endless cycle of giving up your life every 13 years, passing down your Titan power to your child or whoever. Basically, that's what's constantly happened throughout the story of Attack on Titan. And that's kind of like with her finally standing up and being free, the cycle has been broken, and finally something can be done. But also to dive a little bit deeper into Norse mythology, Eren also takes a resemblance to Odin. And the reason why I say Odin is because Odin was someone that was the All-Father, someone that had the all-seeing eye. And when you think about the power he currently has, which is the Attack Titan and the Founding Titan, he's able to kind of see into the future. And, Odin was able to do the same. And basically, Odin knew that Ragnarok was going to happen and, the end of the world was going to happen, but he felt happiness in the fact that the world wasn't technically coming to an end when, Ragnarok initiated. There would be life still left after, and that's kind of what I think Eren was smiling about, why he was so happy, is because he probably saw the life after Ragnarok was done, which is the rumbling of the Titans. So, yeah, okay, enough with the Norse mythology. I know I probably bored a lot of you guys, and it's probably stuff you guys have already known, and like I said, I apologize if you already knew about all this stuff, if you heard about it. I hate to regurgitate things you probably have heard, but I wanted to get my 2 cents of it out there, since, I do like Norse mythology and the topic and how it relates with Attack on Titan. But, okay, anyways, the chapter, getting in and diving into the details of what happened, the chapter starts off with a very simple message. It shows Historia, reading her book about Ymir, the founding Titan, the original Titan. And since the very beginning, we've always heard about Ymir being this godlike being, someone that had so much power, and it was a golden age. And then eventually, we found out that something happened, and then, the Eldians took control, and they completely ruined the Marlins. I think that's how you pronounce it. I know I'm probably butchering that, but basically, that's what happened, and, the Titans just took control and they destroyed other people, and that's why there's been a lot of hatred ever since, to this very day, and it's the truth, actually. To a certain extent, it's very true, and history was not destroyed. The Marley didn't actually ruin history. They actually did keep legitimate history, but it still doesn't excuse what they're doing now. But, anyways, it starts off with Historia reading about Ymir, and it's a happy-go-lucky story. Basically, Frida starts to say, that you should be like her. She's a really kind girl. She is very dependable, and she depended on others. And it's a very, very interesting theme that plays with the entirety of this chapter. Maybe I say the entirety of Attack on Titan. And that is that Frida was trying to tell Historia to be happy and be like Ymir, but Ymir's life wasn't necessarily good, so to say, because Ymir was a slave, And it kind of falls in line with what Kenny said in his, like, final moments and all that. Everybody's a slave to something. Everybody. It's a big message. It was a very big message with Kenny's, you know, entire story, is that everybody is a slave, either to passion, lust, money, whatever. Everybody is a slave to something, be it good or bad. And that's kind of what Ymir was. And she was dependent, but also people depended on her. For instance, she thought it was okay to be able to be in her position. She was so happy to be wanted, but also she had Stockholm Syndrome, and she kept going back to the very person that constantly abused her. And it's sad, really, because, like, she was a slave to the king. And then the king was also probably a slave to power and all that. And then, you know, the children were a slave to their blood. And then, you know, the royal family was a slave to their legacy and, you know, what needed to be done. And basically, it's very symbolic in a way with the chapter, how every character within the flashback, they have all their eyes shaded. Even the king. Everybody has their eyes shaded, which, once again, represents, basically, they're a slave. They're not able to see. They're always staring at one objective, nothing else. Their eyes are not clear. And when you see, you know, Ymir open up her eyes, and you can see the shining of her eyes, it represented she was finally free, and she was able to do what she wants. She's no longer just, you know, the shy girl that's just a slave. She is her own person now. She will decide what she wants. She is not a slave. And even then, at the end of the day, she still probably will be a slave to something, because once again, it fits with the story. But, yeah, continuing on with the message, though, it starts off very dark. It basically shows that there's a bunch of slaves that were captured by the Eldians. And kind of find out, Ymir was actually a slave. She was someone that was a Marlin, which is very shocking. I mean, I'm assuming that's what she was, because when you think about the topic of what they were discussing, what the king discussed and all that, it was obvious that these villagers were slaves that they overthrew. They took over the village, which is probably the Marlins, that, you know, we know as the main enemy of the story, which is kind of ironic, really, that Ymir was probably one of them. But anyways, she was a slave, and you saw a depiction of one of the slaves getting their, you know, tongue completely cut off, which basically meant that every slave there got their tongue cut off, because no slave talked whatsoever, and Ymir never talked at all throughout the entirety of the chapter at all either. Even if she showed emotion at the end, she never talked, which meant that, yes, she had no tongue. Now, I know many are going to say, but since she has a Titan power, why didn't she, you know, get her tongue fixed or healed, which I don't really know. It probably did, probably not, but even then, we gotta remember that this was a traumatized little girl that probably didn't really know what to say or couldn't speak at all to begin with because she was so traumatized, so we gotta overlook that fact. The point is, the main message is that before she had her Titan power, she wasn't allowed to speak, their tongues were taken, and she also had her eye completely removed, because you can see the blood coming out where her eye used to be. Remember, he was actually telling everybody, if you don't tell me who it is that freed the pigs, I'll have everybody lose an eye. Slaves don't need both eyes. That's what he was saying. And obviously, Ymir got her eye removed, and that's why she was running through the woods. She was basically as like some form of firing squad, and, you know, just for blood sport, basically. And she had an eye removed, and she was running with arrows in her, and also no tongue, so she couldn't even cry out or anything. And it's sad, really. So, before she had her Titan power, she had no tongue, she lost an eye, she's a slave. And even after she became basically one of the most powerful beings in the world and became God, she still decided to protect and serve the very man that has abused her and tormented her. But the reason why she didn't, and she didn't harm the king and take over, was because, once again, it plays on with the earlier themes. She wanted to be wanted, and she also wanted to depend on someone. Both sides. She wanted to be dependable and also dependent on someone. She was dependent on the king and him constantly reassuring her, but also he was dependent on her, and she liked that feeling, and so she was a slave to that very feeling of being dependent and wanted, and eventually her legacy, she became to the point to where she didn't care anymore. She didn't live. She lost the will to live because of things that happened, constant death, etc. And also, if you look at the wound, it looks like it went for her spine as well, which originates with, you know, how Titans normally die, through the spinal cord. You can see where she kind of got hit right there through the spine, through the shoulder and all that. I could be wrong, but it does look like that. But if it's not the case of her giving up the will to live, she, you know, she died because of spinal cord. But I could see why she would give up the will to live, because, I mean, she was forced to basically become a breeding factory. She had to hold the legacy like she did. It was an awful life. And, you know, what's even worse about all of this, though, is the fact that she protected the very man that's done so much horrific things to her. And it really just started the cycle, you know, the Ouroboros I talked about, and she was constantly locked in. And what was really disturbing about, you know, the chapter was the depiction of what Ymir's children did to her. It's, once again, I gotta get back into Norse mythology, because it's actually very, very poetic in a way. It's like, whoa, it blows my mind. FYI, if you don't know who Ymir is. I know you know Ymir as in the story of Attack on Titan, but Ymir is actually based off of a frost giant. Basically kind of like a major deity in Norse mythology. Very strong, like all-powerful, like a really strong frost giant, the original. And Ymir got slayed by Odin and his brothers. And upon Ymir's death, Ymir's body was bleeding endlessly, like blood, and basically became oceans. And Ymir's entire corpse and body became the very foundation of Earth itself. That's what Norse mythology depicts. And when you think about the origin story of what happened to Ymir and her children, her body was separated and consumed by her children to be able to create the very world they're in. So it's very similar to Ymir's story, is that Ymir's body, he didn't obviously want his body to be like that, but upon his death, it split up and created the very world that everybody knew of Midgard. And that's kind of what happened here, is that Ymir's death led to the creation of Eldian Empire, but also the Marlins, you know, actually being in control right now. The entire world structure is thanks to her very death, and it's been an endless cycle ever since. So, it's crazy, honestly. Besides just the disturbing factors of what the kids did, it's crazy to see once again how it ties in with that. But, we also got to talk about the reveals of how, once again, Ymir was technically not a royal blood. She was a slave. Like I said, potentially a Marlin. She was from Marley and all that, and she was actually someone that was not of Eldian blood. But eventually her blood mixed with the king's, and eventually that's where the line started. And there's a lot of questions I have, which is really not explained, is how did, you know, all of the Eldians get the ability to transform into Titans? Because, you know, if they are technically all related, it doesn't make sense how they are. Because in 2,000 years, it doesn't make sense how, you know, one girl, Ymir, was able to have her descendants be able to literally spread out amongst the entirety of the Eldian people. I doubt that. So, because of my thoughts on that, I just think that there's definitely more to it than that. But even then, though, it's crazy to think that technically the enemy of, you know, the Marley is actually themselves as well. Because Ymir could potentially be from them. And then also Eldians as well. She's a mixture between both of them from their blood. And it kind of says that they're really just the same. It just depends on what side you're really on. And it's kind of a theme that Attack on Titan has wanted for a very long time. Or been going for a very long time since Season 3. But getting back into some details of it, though, I find it kind of sad, though, that Ymir basically was, no matter where she was at life, or in her life, she was a slave to something. A slave to a person. See, even when she became all-powerful, she was a slave to the Eldians. When, you know, she finally was freed and she died, she was still a slave even in death. And she was a slave in message, too. She was a slave to be used as a god, as a devil, etc. She was always used as a way to boost someone's agenda, and so she never really got to be her own person ever. And that's why Eren, what he said at the end, really matters. He's like, let's just destroy this world, is because it means a lot. He's just like, I'm done with this. It's a cycle that needs to end, and it's never going to end unless something very drastic actually has to happen. And there you go. So a big thing I do want to talk about now is how long Ymir obviously has been inside of the Path's dimension. And I don't know how long it's been, but it's definitely probably been an eternity, at least for her. Because you gotta look at the depiction we got of, you know, this chapter. She was constructing every individual Titan with just her little bucket, and she created, you know, a staircase even next to just the foot of these colossal Titans that would eventually make up the walls, She was just making this big staircase and this big foot with a bucket with sand. And it's scary, honestly, because even though time is very distorted and different in this world, this dimension, it still means that in your thoughts, your mind, it's still going on like normal, like minutes, hours, days, etc. So Ymir was basically stuck in this dimension by herself, probably for a millennia. And you gotta imagine, that would really weigh heavily on your mind, the loneliness, the sadness, etc., especially when you're all connected to everybody that's a part of your bloodline, able to see their memories, just the tragedy of your choices and what you did in the past, etc. So, Ymir is just a really tormented soul that's been locked away for so long, even beyond 2,000 years. It's just been so long, and I'm glad to see she's finally being able to be free. Maybe she just honestly wants to die, like legitimately die permanently, and so the only way to really end that probably is to get rid of the Titans completely and the world itself. So yeah, so anyways, another big thing I want to talk about before I wrap up this video, though, I want to talk about the creature that was in the water. Besides Norse mythology, the creature potentially is a parasite, and if I had to assume anything, it's of alien origin, and it could be the only thing, and the reason why it's spread to, let's say, these certain individuals a part of Ymir's bloodline is because it is adapted to only go with the host it likes. That's usually how parasites are. They go after the certain host they like, and probably it adapted to, you know, Ymir's bloodline, and it likes that type of blood, and so because of that, it doesn't want to go to others, and that's probably why the Marlins can actually transform into Titans, is because the parasite is not compatible with them. It would die in their blood, etc., or in their spinal fluid. So I do think that it's very interesting that you know, the introduction of this parasite was done. I mean, I don't think it needs a lot of clarification. All we just need to know was that it's been around since the very beginning. It's an ancient parasite, the last of it. That's all we really need to know. I don't think it needs to really be given much more context than that. It really sets the message perfectly, I think, and I think everybody can agree that it's probably the representation of the coordinate and the world tree that's in the past dimension. But okay, that's my thoughts. It's a very long-winded video. I'll probably make another video talking about other little details if you guys want, but I kind of want to wrap up this video here. So, I love you guys. You have a wonderful day or night wherever you live. If you enjoy my content, you know, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And if you want to get notified whenever I upload a video, please click the bell icon down below. And with that, Chibi out.